when it's too late.
Yeah, yeah. Do I have a good financial plan? Oh my God, you're in college, bro. I'm just here. Oh, we're all in the same class. Yeah, yeah. That's good.
What is that? Temporal?
I scored like a 30.
Are you sure?
A what? A 30. The highest I've given.
Try to fail me.
A 42. On the personal survey? Yeah. How do you fail that? If you look, it says yes plus one, and then no.
Hundred on hundred. She's a double thing.
Are you supposed to get the highest? I think you are. I think you get 100.
I was like, wait, it was right. And then we had regular school wrong.
Yeah, no.
Where?
We're about to start. I want to thank everyone for coming. The International Day of Women and Girls in Science, this is the 10th anniversary for it, but it's the first time we've ever celebrated it here. So it's our first annual celebration of it at TVCC, and I'm hoping to make this an annual event. So this is our inaugural kickoff of hopefully celebrating it for many years to come, but also the celebration of the 10th year internationally. We've got a great group of speakers today. Our first speaker is actually local, so she is a vet from Veterinary Medical Center. Is that what the name is? So it used to be Morton Vet Clinic, and now it's Veterinary Medical Center. And we've had the pleasure of using her for our vet and getting to know her, and she's a great vet and a great person. Unfortunately, she did live in Kansas City for a little while, My condolences, being a Philadelphia fan. But she went on to Oklahoma State to get her vet degree. You've only been here since what, 2023? So she's only been here since 2023. So she's kind of a newbie to the area. And I hope all you'll give her a nice big welcome. Thank you. You want to hold this? Maybe, maybe not.
Hello. Can you hear me? Is the volume good? Okay. My name is Lexi Clay. I'm an associate veterinarian here in Athens at Veterinary Medical Center of Athens. A bit about me and how I made it here is that I'm originally from Nebraska, and due to my dad's job, I lived all over the country. Upon graduation from Kansas City, Missouri, I ended up going to Oklahoma State. So for my bachelor's degree and my graduate degree, I went to Oklahoma State. I was lucky enough to have gotten dual credit classes in high school, so I was able to take a year off of my undergraduate degree, which was very great because now that I'm paying my student loans off, I realized how expensive out-of-state tuition is. I would not have been able to go out of state for school had I not gotten those out-of-state scholarships. So it was really important that I did well in those courses so I could cut time off. Being that I've had 2 degrees now from the school that I wanted to be at and I'm hired, it really doesn't matter where you go to school as long as you love what you do and you're good at it. I became a vet because my best friend Brooke. So I knew I wanted to become a veterinarian when I was 7 years old. I shared a dream with her, Brooke. We had a play kitchen that we turned into a vet clinic, and there wasn't a single stuffed animal in either of our houses that didn't have a cast, Band-Aids, or was taped in some way. Nothing with fur was safe. Unfortunately, in 2nd grade, her kidney cancer became metastatic, and she got brain cancer, and it was terminal. When she was not at the hospital, she was at home with me when she felt like being a kid again, and we were vets. When she passed, shortly after being diagnosed, I knew I wanted to be a vet, not just for me, but for both of us. I got lucky enough that her passing gave me purpose, and even though I second-guessed it at times, I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian through and through. Some people struggle finding what they want to do, and I did second-guess wanting to be a veterinarian as hard as some of the times got, but I never struggled with what I wanted to do, and I was lucky in that way. But with some therapy and a whole lot of student loans, I'm fully vetted now. So for vet school, I spent 2019 to 2023 at Oklahoma State's College of Veterinary Medicine in Stillwater, Oklahoma. It was the best and the worst. Getting your doctorate in veterinary medicine means 3 years of classroom and doing labs every afternoon. You go in at like 7:30 and you get home at 7:30. It was 20 to 23 hours of credit hours of classes every semester for 6 semesters. The final year is just clinicals, so you do 12 months. You don't get a summer your last year. You do 12 months of clinicals. At Oklahoma State, they're 2 weeks long. Most of them are at the teaching hospital, so you do internal medicine, neurology, practical, like normal practice, general practice, all of those things at the university, and then you're able to take externships. I was able to take 7 externships, so 14 weeks of externships, to which I came to Veterinary Medical Center of Athens and fell in love, where I eventually would take a job. I had the best time on externships because that's where I found mentors that wanted to actually mentor me. So I used all of my externships basically as working job interviews. So I found whether or not I wanted to work at these places by spending 2 weeks there. Anyone can fake an entire day of everyone getting along and not being a toxic environment, but being there for 2 weeks, you find the ins and outs and what works and what doesn't. So I would take very good care and caution in finding your externships and your internships, because those are how you find places to work. If you just go to an interview that lasts an hour, you may find 2 weeks down the road that you hate it, and you turn down a really good offer because you didn't spend 2 weeks there. I found a very, very good mentor. His name is James Morton. He's my boss, so I kind of have to say that. But he's been great to me. I get to do specialty surgeries and things that my classmates never would have dreamed to do because I have his mentorship. So in the summer of 2023, when I graduated, I started working here in Athens. I felt completely unprepared. I had been in school for the last 7-8 years. Well, before that, I was still in high school, so all my whole life, I had only been in school. When I graduated, I felt useless. Like, you could ask me anything and I wouldn't know my name. I'd been in school, and now I just wasn't. I chose to move outside of Dallas over here, which was 11 hours from home. I had to make a life here, find friends, hobbies, and in a new state, in a new city, and I had a big girl job. I had to figure out how to make work. I felt utterly inadequate, and imposter syndrome is real. They always talked about it in professional school, that you'll feel like you don't belong, but you do. You just have to get over yourself. I always doubted it, and when they mentioned it in professional school, you don't think you'll wonder how you got there, but you will. But you have to know that you do belong and you are worth what you're worth. So it's important to be teachable, because there's always something to learn, and that has gotten me a very good job and very good opportunities. Miss Dolly, I was going to do some cases. These are some interesting cases from when I first started back in 2023. Dolly has become, her owner has become a frequent flyer, because every 3 months she seems to have some catastrophic thing happen. So she sees me regularly. She's a 7-year-old Great Dane. She was an intact female at the time. She weighed 155 pounds, which coincidentally I did too. She came in for acute bloating. So her owner noticed that she had fed her dinner. She came home, fed her dinner, and she started to get really wide. When Dolly came into me, she looked like she had swallowed a watermelon. She was already a giant dog. She was overweight, but she looked completely abnormal. She was vomiting for the owner, but nothing would come up, so she was retching. When you went to touch her, she was a very nice dog, but she was very, very painful. So when I see a dog that's bloated, I want to take them straight to x-ray. And things on my differential list for a dog, especially a giant breed dog, that is having gastrointestinal issues would be pancreatitis, a foreign body, like she ate something, but she was an older dog, so she was less likely to swallow a rubber ducky than a lab, or a GDV, which is gastric dilation with volvulus, which is a twisted stomach. So this is her x-ray. It was picture perfect, what I learned in a textbook. It revealed that she was bloated with gas. There was some food in it, but there was a Smurf hat. So if you can see on the top, the stomach is like this, and it folds over itself. So because it's closed off, that was why she was retching and nothing was coming out, was because her esophagus was completely closed off. And that's why gas was building up. And you can see just a little bit of her intestines. They're really gas-filled because there was nowhere for it to go. A GDV requires emergency surgery, short of euthanasia. So the emergency surgery requires me to untwist it, but before I can untwist it, it has to be deflated, because I open her abdomen and it's just stomach everywhere. If it's not repaired and restored, they can die within hours due to the lactic acid buildup, because when the stomach is twisted, it ties off the blood vessels. As soon as I saw the x-ray, I had my technicians rush her into surgery. She got on fluids, and we took care of her. You can't pass a tube to deflate the stomach because the esophagus is tied off. So I have to push needles, large bore needles in there, and slowly express it to get some of that air out so that I can twist it back. Just because she's so bloated, there's not enough room for me to put it back. I was looking at a dog that weighed as much as I did. This was my first GTV that I did by myself, which is why Dolly, every single time she comes in, I was elbows deep in her abdomen and terrified that I wasn't going to be able to save her life. It was midnight, I had nobody to call, and I had to figure it out on my own. I was shaking in my boots. I wanted to cry, and I was pacing, trying to replay every GDV that I had ever sat in on, every video I had ever watched, and I reread the textbook like 10 times while they were actually prepping her for surgery. I thought I was in over my head, but I did it. I had to have confidence in myself that I knew enough to get me through. And having confidence goes a long way. Dolly survived surgery and stayed in the hospital with us for several days. She was a senior dog, so it took a little bit longer for her to come around. I would end up seeing Dolly just 3 months later for a pyometra because she was intact, which is a uterine infection, which required an emergency spay and more antibiotics. 3 months after that, I saw her again, this time for limping. So she was limping in her back left leg. I took x-rays of her hips, knees, all the way down to her toes. She had presented to me originally, not necessarily for limping, the owner didn't describe it as limping, but saying that she slowed down. She wasn't jumping on the bed. She didn't really have to jump, but like climb onto the bed. She wasn't climbing onto the couch, and it was harder for her to go up and down stairs. When I did the orthopedic exam, she wasn't painful in her feet. I could move her hocks, which are like ankles. I could move her hocks completely just fine. But she was so tight in her hip, I had to sedate her to get x-rays. So even with sedation, when I tried to flex and extend her hip, it physically would not allow me. So if you look at the left side, you see that it's really shallow. It's squared off, it's sharp. It's got all these osteophytes, like bony protuberances. So she has degenerative joint disease in the left hip. The head of the femur is barely in that socket, and that's why it's moving a little bit every time she walks, and that's why she's so painful. So she was less likely to use it because she hurt. The right hip for a 7-year-old giant breed dog, I mean, she was a big girl, looks great. So if both hips looked like the right, she would be great, but because the left was not following the rules, she had to have a procedure called an FHO. So an FHO is a femoral head ostectomy. A femoral head ostectomy requires me to cut the head of the femur off, make sure that all of the pieces are soft, and so that there's no poking because that joint space is still exposed. What it does in dogs, because the biomechanics of the joint are different, the physics allows them to scar in the joint, and it makes a false joint capsule. So they're still able to use the leg mostly normal with much less pain than if it had this horrible monstrosity of a hip in there. The other option is a total hip replacement, but they would have to go to Dallas for that. A total hip replacement for each side runs about $8,000, and that's not financially feasible for most people. She was a senior dog again, so they were not willing to spend the $8,000, so I was able to do the procedure. So the procedure consists of cutting that damaged bone and grinding, that's grinding in the socket, but afterwards, they're so much more comfortable. They're walking almost the same day that they wake up. After they wake up, they're going to be on antibiotics for 2 weeks. They're on rest for 6 to 8 weeks so that that joint can scar in. If they use it too much, then that scar tissue won't form and that leg will be loose. And so they're more likely to splay. And if they splay, they can actually pop the other hip out of the socket. So we want them to have slow, controlled exercise for that 6 to 8 weeks. They're in a crate a lot. There's no jumping. If they have too little exercise, they're not getting those 15-minute walks a couple times a day, then they're more likely to atrophy. If they atrophy and that muscle starts to waste, they won't use it. So the reason that you do the procedure is so that you have a 4-legged dog. And if they don't use it enough, they'll atrophy and you have a 3-legged dog with a kickstand. Dolly had to be in the largest cone of shame. It was a 40-centimeter donut because she had a 40-centimeter cone to begin with. The cone, 40 centimeters, is about 15 inches. She was basically a walking satellite. She ran into everything. She knocked her owner over. She was a bull in a china shop. She is anyway because she's really clumsy, but it was horrible with the cone. So she got a donut, which didn't last long because she figured out how to pop it. And when she popped it, she ate her sutures open twice. And so she had the cone of shame not for 2 weeks, but for like 8. She had been around the block a couple times with the cone, and so she knew exactly what she needed to do to get rid of it. My last case is Winchester. He's such a sweet boy. He came to me with his owner after being run over in his driveway, and he was found unable to walk. He was just 6 months old. He was a 50-pound bloodhound puppy, full of life. X-rays revealed that he had broken both back legs, his left femur and his right tibia, so the top thigh bone on the left leg and the bottom shin bone on the right leg. With both of these injuries, one would have to be fixed and the other could be amputated, but one of them had to be fixed regardless, otherwise he would never be able to walk again. Money was definitely an issue with the owners, and they elected to euthanize. But as my husband can attest to, I did not want that to happen because I have a soft spot for hound dogs. So I paid for the surgery. I did the surgery on both legs. I plated them, and he spent the next 6 months healing. He spent the 6 months at my house, destroying everything and howling. His bilateral bone plates were the only option for him because being that he was going to be a 100-pound dog, he could not be 3-legged. So this was the really cool hardware that he got to go home with. It only cost me about $1 bajillion. He was happy as a clam the first day he got to walk because it took 4 days before he could get surgery, so he spent 4 days unable to get up. After he got up, or after the surgery, he woke up and he started walking around like nothing was wrong. The problem was 4 weeks after his surgery, his body started to reject one of the plates. So his femur plate, the top plate over there on his left leg, actually got infected and his incision opened up. So we had to put him on really, really strong antibiotics so that his bone could heal. It took about 3 months for his bone to heal enough that we could take the plate out. And once we took the plate out, it had to heal again because all of those screw holes had to fill in so that he didn't break his leg a second time. Removing the plate was actually removing the nidus of infection, so although he'd have to be on antibiotics for 2 weeks after the plate was removed, he did heal pretty well pretty quickly compared to the chronic pain that he was in when that plate was in there. Typically when dogs get plates or any sort of hardware, screws, pins, wires, they keep them. The lifespan of a dog is the lifespan of a plate. In people, typically we take that hardware out at some point, but unfortunately dogs don't live till they're 80, so they keep them. I still have the plate because I was unwilling to get rid of it, but he does not. He is happy. He has both incisions are healed, and he has a little bit of a funny Forrest Gump run, but he looks really good. He ended up filling out with his muscle. The antibiotics made him a little bit nauseous, so he lost a little bit of weight, but he's filled out very, very well. There are a lot of hard days. Because I don't get to choose what happens, I have to give options, and the owners get to choose the fate of the animal. I can't be judgmental. It's very difficult sometimes, but I can't be judgmental because I don't know their situation and I don't know the pet. I can see your dog for an hour and not know that your dog has bitten 10 people in the past. So if you elect to do something, that's on you, not me. I do have a lot of hard days when there's people that can't afford things. I am not able to take everything home. I sure try, but it's hard. When I can't take something home, it is heartbreaking because it ends in euthanasia. But I had to come to the realization and be okay with the fact that I can't fix everything, and I can do my best on the ones that I can. And even though there's a lot of hard days where I have 6 euthanasias and I have a bunch of traumas and dogs that don't make it, I love the good days because I have a lot of clay-only clients. I have people that drive 2+ hours to come see me that live in Dallas. They could go anywhere in Dallas. There's a million vet clinics in Dallas. But they drive 2 hours to see me, and they text me. They call me. I get cards when dogs get better. I get good reviews with pictures and updates. That's what makes me feel fulfilled enough to keep doing what I do. The bad sucks, but the good definitely outweighs the bad. Every pet that I get to send home and I get to call with a good test result fills my wholesome battery, and that's what keeps me going. Does anybody have any questions? Yes. Well, usually when they have like if you pop the hip out of the socket, well, I don't pop hips out of sockets, but if they fell and popped the hip out of the socket, they got hit by a car, that ligament that holds the head of the femur into the socket tears, and it's not going to stay in. And so because it won't stay in, if you take the head of the femur off, that gets rid of the problem, and that'll scar in so that they can still use the leg. Otherwise, it will just luxate when they start to bear weight on it, and it won't stay. Cats, typically it happens from like a dog fight where they get the leg pulled, and that's when we need to do an FHO on cats.
So is the big difference, I mean, obviously this isn't something to do with humans.
No.
Is the big difference that they have 4 legs, or is there something anatomically different?
Anatomically different, so the biomechanics of the joint is different in the physics, so the angles of the joint are different, and so the way that the bone takes pressure and sits in the hip is different than ours because they're quadrupeds and not bipeds. It helps. And it does help because when we have to have surgery, we have to have little scooters and crutches and stuff because we only have one little leg to carry us around, but luckily, most of them have 3 good legs that they can use to carry them while that other leg heals, so it takes a lot of the brunt off.
Anyone else have questions for Dr. Foote?
Yeah, so if you could visit yourself as a freshman biology student, what would you know yourself? Knowing what you know now.
I definitely would have went to class more, and that sounds really cheesy, but I definitely would have went more because attendance is really important, and they didn't pay me to say that. I just wish I would have went more. Now that I have to use all of that, I'm like, oh, I remember seeing that, but I don't remember that. But I do cultures. I get cultures and sensitivities back all the time, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember that from microbiology and how bad it smelled in the incubator. But you'll forget a lot, but it's the classes now are building blocks for everything else. So if you aren't here and doing well now, it gets so much harder later. Yes.
Any chance you see rats?
I do.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I do some exotics. I'm the only one at the clinic that sees exotics. I'll do my best because I'm not board certified in exotics, but I'm willing to read and do my best. I have had rats to my husband's demise, and I just saw one the other day for an upper respiratory infection. Yeah, yeah.
Question, doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Could we go on a tour at this beautiful practice?
Yes, Miss Ginger.
If anybody wants to come on a tour, what do they need to do?
Uh,
As a group, a single, of course, we're a very busy practice. Yesterday, I gave a tour to one individual person that was blown away. And we want you to be blown away and to learn, because this is what it's all about. We have over 100 staff members, is that correct?
yes.
So maybe you can come to our practice and learn a little bit about what, not only what Dr. Clay does, but what the other doctors do, and learn that we have like 150 boarding facility, luxury boarding. So just call Dr. Clay, text her, or me, and we'll put you on the tour. Thank you. Awesome job.
Are you next?
We've got about, I don't know, until 10:05. The drinks and snacks are kind of concealed behind a display out there, but all the drinks and snacks are on the right-hand side if you go out on the right. Our next talk will be at 10:05.
One of my students, I got to sign over here.
Oh, was that mine? Sorry. Thank you.
Where y'all going?
Put that leg down. I don't know. I just checked. It's been hitting so good. I've been doing it like sometimes they lost me.
No one has the same vibe as we had last year. It's not like Tiffany.
I'm happy I don't know which is that math because I've been working on it.
And he was like, no.
And he's like, no.
Yeah, I'm the only flyer that's
I'm
in
like,
all
bro,
the
the two schools in first have no favorite. You're not in a minute class.
Oh, that's why you're mad?
And I would love to Huh?
Yeah, I think you have great faces on the movie. I just think it's the backstory.
I just think it's the combination. I think because like Maddie and Alexa overrated us. And I'm not saying like I like something in it. It's not that. It's just the combination of us together. It's like not fair compared to the other person. And then
Oh, baby. Do you know who my rock spot is? Do you know how hard that is for me? Alexa, yeah, I didn't think I was gonna get mad at Alexa. I thought I was gonna get Java and Hannah again.
Yeah.
Because I had them last year.
I'm just like,
And then, and it's honestly not that bad. He just has a bad habit of stenting like this instead of getting in the sun. Huh? I was telling him again. But yeah, he just has a bad habit of stenting like this. Where did you get this? He hasn't done it very long. He's in the back spot. I told you.
I get and I get this I get really aggressively goes and I mean don't put your arms like you. I think it's my own.
Kelly's arm was her fault. That's how she was doing it. I know, listen.
What do you mean? I told my ACL.
Like what?
And I know you're not supposed to do that. It's a natural reaction, like it's my head on my arm.
Yeah, no, but I was a hard time too.
It wasn't like I fell. I was doing like.
I turn my body. I back up. Like whenever you're falling, instead of putting an arm down, you just turn. And she's like, I just got face diving. You just like do it. Yeah, I go like this. Or I go like this. And end up But I'm on him though, like I'm on him, like I've been on him every practice. No, he has been, well, he was trying to put something yelling at him. Because the first practice that we had, when they put us with our step group, when they told us our step group, I was like, this is weird. We started doing it, we were doing good, but he like, wasn't doing, I was like, well, me again, son. I was like, couldn't step fucking out. I was like, because that's not gonna help. I said, I don't infectious, that ain't going. He was like, okay, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. But he's actually trying.
Barely catching yourself. I mean, like.
No, I almost fell.
Like, bro.
And then when we turned around, I got up. I said, catch me. And he was like, I'm sorry. I was like, I'm serious. I won't lie, like, what did you do?
I started yesterday.
Yeah, I was surprised when I got I think
Again, welcome to our first ever celebration of the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. 10-year anniversary internationally, first time we've ever done it, and again, hoping we can do this every year moving forward. So Lexi Clay did a great job with our first presentation. Another semi-local presenter, we have Dr. Carla Lacerda from UT Tyler. She's a chemical engineer, but she also works with anatomy and physiology with cardiovascular systems. So she's going to tie together engineering with anatomy and physiology. So it should be a really great talk. Not too much pressure.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to talk to you all today. I really like talking about, you could be anywhere as long as you are willing to learn. And what I hope I put together here is just a talk of how I ended up where I am. My career took several turns, and I didn't wake up one day thinking I am going to be this. So all I want to emphasize here is, if there's any lesson, is you take what you have right now and you keep pushing forward, and it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't have to be a straight path. I don't know how to work this. How do I move?
I'm not mansplaining on Women's Day.
Why? I guess I'm not pushing hard enough. Oh, okay. I wasn't pushing hard enough. All right. So I just wanted to tell everybody where I'm from. I can't see my map very well. This is the map of Brazil. I'm from the state that is in red. It's called Minas Gerais. This is my little county. So this state is as big as Texas, and I'm from the middle of nowhere, in the middle of nowhere, Brazil, okay? So my hometown is, I really don't know what I'm doing. My hometown is right here. This is called Cataguases. It's got like an Indian, or I guess a native Brazilian name. So it's very small. It's about 50,000 people, and it's been 50,000 people since I was born, which was a while ago. So what I have to say there is, I come from a family of people who plant plants. So that's my uncle over there, and I am selling these big, huge trees, right? So the whole town is very well known for agriculture, so basically decorative plants, and all these people are raised with this mindset that your only future is to plant plants and sell your plants, except I didn't necessarily like any of that. So I wanted to make things, and I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to make. My dad, so my mom's side, everybody planted plants. My dad's side of the family, they were more like carpenters. My dad sold construction materials, and I thought I wanted to build bridges and houses, and I originally wanted to be a civil engineer, and my dad, who's about this tall, told me nobody's gonna believe a civil engineer that is this tall. Okay, so as a woman, you cannot be a civil engineer, end of story. But I knew I liked math, and I liked stuff that nobody really cared about. So I was also the proud owner of one of those chemistry sets that toy manufacturers sold to kids in the 80s. So that really made me very happy, because I really loved pH indicator reactions. So I moved to this town, not very far. My parents told me I could not move very far to go to college. So I moved to this place. This is called Viçosa. It's one of the best universities in Brazil, and luckily it was close enough to my home. And I got a degree in this thing called food engineering, which is basically chemical engineering with a big focus on food processing. So rather than pumping natural gas in a pipeline, my learning examples were, how long does it take to roast a turkey? okay? So how did I learn 3D heat conduction? Roasting turkeys, okay? So the big picture here was I really wanted a degree that allowed me to do some cool things, but I still didn't know. And honestly, from all the way to graduate school, I really didn't care where life would take me. All I know was that I started hearing that engineers in Brazil weren't very valued compared to other countries where engineers are treated like gods. So I just decided I need to go abroad and see what's going on. And that's how I started looking for programs and you know, trying to go to these really weird places. One thing that I did is I got this exchange program to go to France. I went to France and I lived in a tiny little small town in the middle of nowhere, France. I visited Paris, but never lived there. And I worked on this bottling plant, which, I don't know, have you ever seen this beverage? It's like a cousin of Fanta, right? So, or Orangina, how the French people will call it. It was actually a small capacity plant that did most of the development. So there we played a lot with like developing new soda flavors. And that's how I was really sure I want to manufacture stuff. I want to work, you know, making new things, new products. This is my graduating class. We used to take these big pictures of all the kids graduating on the same semester. I'm stuck again. I did some job interviews. I decided ultimately to go to graduate school, mostly because I wanted to go abroad. And I wanted to do things that, you know, truly had an impact. At this point, I was thinking, I want to work with computational modeling of bioreactor kinetics. Okay, so it sounded very specific. I was like, why bioreactor kinetics? Well, it was a question of timing and opportunity and what I really loved that I learned in undergrad. And I thought, well, all these manufacturing companies have wastes. I want to work with treatment of waste, designing these big reactive treatments. And then I thought, well, between grad school, different paths, what is going to come out of this? And I thought, well, there's no pressure, right? I'm doing the right things, and the right things are keeping an open mind, knowing that I'm always learning, right? You're always learning. And maybe you know what you don't want, right? For example, I knew at this point my dream of building bridges was gone. I probably wasn't going to go back to study concrete. So maybe you know what you don't want, and that helps, and maybe that guides you, or maybe it's just opportunity, right? Try to list back what I really had in my head still, making really cool stuff. Discoveries, I'm still passionate about discovering things. Learning, like I said, you know, I've had a lot of very basic classes before, and sometimes I think I forgot all of them, and I go back and I'm like, ooh, I'm learning this again. But I really like showing people what there's out there and what the needs are, right? Those things that don't exist that we still have to develop. So coming to the US, I was accepted to Colorado State University for a program in chemical engineering that was mostly focused on environmental problems. Okay, so that fit right with what I wanted. And I started hearing all this gossip like, oh, you're a chemical engineer, you must be so smart. Oh, you'll make a ton of money when you graduate. And really, I don't know, like, who cares, right? Like, all I wanted was, I can study, right? And this is something that I always tell everybody that I meet in recruitment events, right? If you have in you the ability to sit and study, you can be an engineer, right? And among all engineering majors, they're no different, right? Whether it's water flowing down a pipe or electricity, right? The principles are all the same. The levels of difficulty are all the same. And all it takes is time to practice, right? You probably can tell that I'm not a very good basketball player, right? Because I didn't practice. And I think there's lots of people here willing to practice music and practice sports. And that's what math is, right? And whenever I'm teaching something to my students, I say, listen, you guys, I can teach you how to use these math and physics tools because they're amazing. And the people who came up with them were truly amazing. I don't think I could have come up with these things myself, right? So all it takes is practice. You learn something, if you let it go, it won't stick, right? But if you practice, it will stick. So this whole perception needs to go away, okay? This whole math is not for me. Math's for everybody, right? I'm probably a little too old for my basketball days, but I believe that if I worked my growing genes early on, I could have made it, okay? And again, we're not talking about professions that will take you to, to be the #1 player of something in some league, right? We're not all fighting to be #1s. We're just fighting to be people who are people first, professionals second in something, right? I actually had a professor once who asked me, why did you never attempt to get into MIT? I said, because I never cared. Like, it doesn't speak to me to be in the best of the best of the best when I can be just as impactful anywhere I go, right? So when I'm talking basketball, I don't know why, I don't even like basketball. I'm not saying we should all be Patrick Mahomes. Okay, whatever, bad timing, I don't know. But back to graduate school, I learned a lot about my computational models that I told you about. I did a lot of experiments that were biochemistry that I'm sure you're learning, protein chemistry, gel electrophoresis, so I did things like that. I did a lot of protein mass spectroscopy. I did a lot of different things in my PhD, and then I came to find out that my advisor kind of struggled developing his research program because of funding, and that's still something that I could. Anyways, I digress. So I decided, maybe environmental problems aren't the best things to focus on. So I took a dramatic turn to this more clinically minded setting. So in my dissertation, I worked with proteome profiling. I have a very basic cartoonish drawing of a mixed community of bacteria of different species. We weren't interested in identifying which species was in there, right? So we didn't do DNA at all. Actually, a different group of collaborators did that. My job was to do what the functions were. Okay, so what was this community doing in different soil settings, in different aquifers, that allow them to thrive as a mixed community of different species? So we're interested in things like sites that were polluted with BTEX, so polluted with aromatics, sites that had heavy metal contaminations. So we wanted to say, okay, if I have a soil sample that has specialized in this one skill or in this one functionality, can I transport it to this other site and then will it bioremediate? So that was the engineering angle. To me, it was just doing science in the lab and playing with very stinky bacteria and growing the cultures and extracting proteins from them and characterizing them. Learning all of this characterization, all these biochemical tools, allowed me to move to different areas, right? So I learned to do research, which in principle was my advisor's research, but he was very clear with me that at the end of my project, I knew more about it than he ever would, and I think that's a very good characteristic of a leader, right? You want a professor that won't hold your hand the entire time. You want a professor that will let you stumble and fall. But then at the end, when you finish grad school, your advisor's like, that's it. You're ready. You're out in the world. And And for a lot of people, it's when you finish your bachelor's degree, okay, beautiful graduation ceremony, and then what, right? So that's when you really need to think and reevaluate. So you think and you reevaluate when you're in high school, you think and you reevaluate when you start in college, and maybe you don't, right? And maybe you're thinking, let's just go, right? But that approach is a little bit limited because you have to know, okay, I have some targets, even if the targets are not fixed. So at the end of grad school, I felt a little tired. So I'm always overthinking, right, and reevaluating. I thought, wow, now they want me to do some more stuff that's not my independent career. What do I do, right? So at the end of grad school or end of your bachelor's degree, that's when you think, am I going to apply for a job in industry? Am I going to start my own business? Am I going to do crazy things? Something's going to happen, right? I know a lot of us are like, now I have to move away from my parents and break up with my boyfriend or get married or all these things. I'm not saying these for comedic purposes. I'm saying these because these all are thoughts that have value, right? If you think you cannot move away from your parents or you cannot break up with this boyfriend, all of these are things that are important to consider in your path. Because what I said a minute ago, I'll stand true by it. We're people. Right? Before we're professionals, we're people, and there are some things that matter, right? So I went on to do a postdoc. Interestingly enough, it was in a Department of Veterinary Medicine, so I really enjoyed the first speaker talking about caring for dogs. I didn't do orthopedics, so I learned all my cardiovascular medicine in that, okay? So this person in the picture, he was my postdoc advisor. He's the #1 veterinary cardiac surgeon in the world, and he deals with very much the same issues that the first speaker was talking about. Veterinary medicine comes down to owners making tough decisions, and here my goal was to help him design these reactors that allowed us to build engineered devices, okay? So particularly, we're looking at heart valves. So if you know anything about people with heart murmurs and when they go in to get a heart valve repair, typically you're getting a mechanical device, or sometimes I guess the street lingo is you're getting a pig valve, right? What he is interested in is getting a replacement material that is a living material that can actually incorporate with your own heart. So this was a fascinating period for me because I was basically the tinkerer. I was in the background building these devices, studying biomechanics, and he was the guy in charge of the clinical application. So I did still biomedical basic research, and he was doing the clinics of it. He still works in a lot of clinical trials with different projects. But to me, what that meant was I got more into biomaterials, I got more into biomechanics and tissue engineering, and then I went on from here to build my own career. So I just have a little bit of keywords here. Biological scaffolds, so I don't know how interested or if you've ever heard of these, but basically I worked with materials that can be used for burn wound recovery. I worked a lot into all sorts of valve disease markers, so comparing different types of valvular diseases. I worked with this very cool technique called laser microdissection, which is a microscope that is mounted with a laser that you can cut microscopic samples for different applications. And that's where I got a lot into this mechanobiology, right? So a field that is slightly different from biomechanics, or in biomechanics you're interested in the mechanics, in mechanobiology we're interested in the biology, okay? So I decided, well, it's time, right? It's time to go away. Nobody tells you when you're done with your postdoc, but you know you're applying for jobs and you're trying to think of, how do I blend everything I have, all the skills I have learned, and make it a portfolio, right? So if you think models, right, they have these books of pictures. What is my book of pictures? I have all these techniques, right? I give these fancy seminars with, you know, words that are not like today. How am I selling myself? And that's an important part. I went to work at Texas Tech in chemical engineering. So what I wanted in my book of pictures, I wanted to sell myself still as a chemical engineering teacher. I did apply for lots of jobs in biomedical sciences, but I don't know, I don't think they liked my profile, or maybe they, I don't know. I never really had success with interviews in that. I always got interviews in engineering, even though lots of people will say, well, your research is not engineering enough, right? Because there's a lot of basic knowledge that must be acquired before we're actually building devices that are implantable. But what I wanted was to teach engineering and influence people by saying, look, whether it's mechanical or electrical or chemical or any of them, there is a breadth of areas that you can work in. And it's not because you're in one of them that you're trapped in there, right? So my PhD work, for example, overlaps a lot with work that civil engineers do, right? But more in the environmental area. So here, the goal was large institution, big research focus, strictly don't care about teaching, okay? And I left and came to UT Tyler, okay? And at UT Tyler, I found that what we value are the students. The students are there, they don't come to class because, I don't know, it's just another class, right? They come to class because they made a commitment to being in Tyler, and I thought there was a ton of value in that. In a sense, living in a small town Texas is very similar to what I left back home, right? So people like being in East Texas, and some people are dying to leave, and some people are dying to come back. But I think those core values of family, of belonging, I think that's something that UT Tyler Engineering is building in the alumni. I love events like this. I love working with anything that is, you know, not strictly classroom, board, solving physics problems. I like that students get an opportunity to meet professors. I like that students get opportunity to meet recruiters and employers right outside our doors. So I think that has a lot of value. And I continue my research in a very much smaller lab setting, but with collaborators around the nation, okay? So at UT Tyler, I do some of my work in animals, and I do some of my work with a few collaborators in bigger institutions. One thing about my job that, you know, I don't know if you've heard of, and sometimes students tell me they don't have time for it. There's a lot of power in student organizations, okay? So whichever club you think you don't need to join it, okay? And I'm not saying join 10 clubs, okay? But if you have an opportunity to join a professional society in whatever field you think you're going to work, there's a lot of value in that, because you will meet professionals, you will meet people that will help you throughout your career. So pay attention to the student organizations that are around you, okay? This is something that matters to me because I never wanted a job where my life would be consumed by my job, because I'm a person first. And I know there are some people out there that are that way, and kudos to them. That's just not me. What I have here is my little one. We were doing a rocket competition at UT Tyler, and she got all into making her own bottle rocket. This matters to me. that UT Tyler gives me the time to watch her grow, okay? And I'm not saying this to be cheesy, or I'm just saying this because I've had tough days and I've had great days, and I can say that the greatest days are the days that I learn about my students and who they are and what they like doing. I love teaching a lab course because I get to interact with them and figure out, okay, let's get a job. What do we need? Let me look at your resume. So those are the things. Helping people, I think, makes me very happy, rather than just thinking, well, am I going to be the next Leonardo da Vinci, right? So I know I'm not. I think that's all I had. One can never be done learning. I think I started with that. Just know that the path is not straight. Lots of people have straight paths. I didn't. You don't have to have a straight path. Think about what you want and where you see yourself, and never be done learning. Like I said, I come from a family where everybody planted plants. This is a very old picture. I have a lot of little girls in that picture. So my mom, my aunts, grandmother, lots of women in my family. I have 2 male cousins and 11 girls. All those girls are now working adults, and all of them are engineers. They're all different engineering specialties, but I'm happy that they moved out and they carved their own path. So I think the final question is, am I where I want to be? I don't know, right? I think I love what I do, but if life takes another turn, I'm not afraid of it, right? So I think about that while you're here. Think about that on your next step, and everything's going to be okay, and everything's going to work itself out. Thank you, guys. Yes, lots. Yes. So this is sad, right? But there's statistics on how taller women make more, and taller men too. So yeah, I can't change my genetics, but.
So TVCC has a very strong collaboration with UT Tyler. If you're interested in going into any of your engineering departments, you have mechanical, civil, electrical, computer. Did I say mechanical already? I can't remember. They have a lot of engineering programs. Come talk to someone in science, and we can put you on the right path to heading to UT Tyler to become an engineer. Maybe we'll get some civil engineers out of our group.
And give it a shot, right? Don't let calculus stop you. People are not solving triple integrals all day in their lives. Trust me, unless they're the math professors.
Also very happy we have, as of last fall, we have a new physicist. Anil Sharma, are you still here? Dr. Sharma is our new physicist, and so we will be breathing life back into university physics starting in the spring, and that's the pathway you would take to go into these engineering programs. So we are ready to prepare you if you want to go to UT Tyler and become an engineer. Just talk to us. Does anybody else have any questions for Dr. Lacerda? Otherwise, we'll take a break until 10:50. We're in between classes, so there's going to be some traffic in and out. At 10:50, we'll have our last 2 talks. Thank you, everyone. Lots of food out there on the right-hand side. We're going to get started back up in about a minute. Both of our next two speakers drove a little bit of a distance to be here. We've kind of gone farther away from Athens as we've gone. So Lexi, Dr. Clay, is in Athens, and she's at the vet clinic. Carla Lacerda, Dr. Lacerda, the last one, came from UT Tyler. And again, great advertising for UT Tyler engineering programs. And if you want to go that route again, talk to one of us. And then our next two presenters are both from Sam Houston State University. Dr. Bucheli is an entomologist that does a lot of work with forensics. So she's going to talk about some of her forensic entomology projects. Be aware that, and she's going to notify you before she gets to slides that might be somewhat graphic, because working with forensics, you tend to work with dead people. So there may be some graphic slides, but she'll let you know when that's about to hit. And then Dr. How do you say, Quinones? She's also from Sam Houston, but a little bit farther south because she's at a different location. So we leave the one that came the farthest for last, and the one that came the closest first. And they took a little longer to get here, so. But let's welcome them, and Dr. Bucheli is going to talk about what she's been doing down there.
Okay.
So you can take it off if you want to.
I probably will. I think so. Yeah, I have it in my hands. I probably don't need my coffee mug up here. Huh? Oh, well. Hello. I guess it's still morning, so good morning. I am really honored to have been invited for your inaugural Women in Science symposium. And I am going to talk to you about taking opportunities, or at least that's how I see my sort of professional pathway. I just sort of fell into everything I'm about to say here. So take all the opportunities, or how I became a forensic entomologist. So as was mentioned, I have given my own talk a rating of R. If you have, this talk has pictures of decomposing human beings in it, several. And I tried not to pick the most graphic ones, but if you're sensitive to that kind of stuff, you might want to depart while it's still safe to do so. So, this is my life. I am this boat, and I am just rocking back and forth in this ocean of the world. And experiences are coming at me right and left. And sometimes I feel like it's just knocking me off my course, and sometimes I feel like they're great, but most of the time I'm just confused. I don't know what day it is. We have a joke in my lab. My graduate students have to come to my doorway, and they have to say their name and state their project, and then I'm like, oh, okay, I know who you are now. You know, these are people I actually sincerely know, but this is kind of how I feel like all the time. But my husband says no. My husband says I feel like this. But at first I was like, how dare you? But then I thought to him, I thought about what he said, and I was like, well, maybe it's actually more appropriate for me to think of my life like this. So anyway, I'm a river of experiences. I'm a river of myself, right? And then all these little experiences are feeding into this river of me. And so I'm going to talk about some of my more impactful experiences I have had. But my big message here is to take all the opportunities that life has to offer you. Sometimes my graduate students complain about having to go see talks about bacteria or whatever, and I do not listen to them. I let them state their complaint, and then I say, go to the talk. Because you never know where you're going to learn the next thing. You never know what that thing is going to be. You never know how it could possibly change your life. The one thing that I have, as a unifying theme in my life is my love for the unloved. I love all the little things. I have always loved all the little things. I am not turned off by the little things at all. And my mom says I was this way since I was born. And so I feel like this is an important part of my journey, because I think, especially as women in science, there's this sort of archetype we're supposed to belong to. We're supposed to behave a certain way. We're supposed to be tall and be very professional and never have face piercings. But who really cares? Because, it's what is, I don't know. To me, it's the little things that matter. So I had a standard K through 12 experience. And then my undergraduate college, Hiram College, is a very small university located near Cleveland, Ohio, so up on Lake Erie. And there was one time so much snow, I got stuck in a snowdrift, and my husband had to pull me out of a snowbank. But there were only 600 people at this university. We were just doing, Gen X, hose water, there was this thing every Friday night where everybody would take off their clothes and run naked through the forest. Like, we were just wild animals. But what I did there was take every single class they had to offer. I have a bachelor's of arts in biology. I'm one class away from a chem minor. I'm one class away from an art minor. I'm one class away from an English minor. And I'm one class away from an environmental studies minor. I have no minor. And then I got cancer. And my husband and I got married young. I was his legal guardian. I was 21, he was 20. And we had to pick a place for graduate school that we could both go to, the one that would accept us both. And so I didn't really have my goal or my sights set on going to some particular graduate school. It was just the graduate school that would accept us both. And that happened to be the Ohio State University. And at the time, it was the second largest university in the United States, competing with University of Wisconsin. And I was in culture shock, because I went from 600 students to, 35,000 undergrads and 15,000 graduate students. It's hard to keep track. But this is where my real professional career started. And I did not do what my advisor did. So a lot of times in the natural, in the organismal fields, you don't have to do the exact same thing that your advisor does. And so my advisor studied wasps, and I didn't want to. I studied Microlepidoptera. So this is a moth in the family Coleophoridae, the genus Coleophora, and it's in the superfamily Gallicuidea. And probably all three of those words mean nothing to you. But this is, everybody, when they think of Lepidoptera, they think of moths and butterflies. Big, right? Luna moths, tiger swallowtails, big, big, big. Well, most of the diversity of Lepidoptera are teeny tiny, the size of a mosquito. And they're gorgeous, but people don't know about that because you kind of have to have a microscope to appreciate them. So the common name of this lineage is the case-making moths or the case bearers. And that's what the word coleo means. It means sheath. And so they're referring to this little shelter that the caterpillars build. So this is the adult. She's beautiful. This is the little baby. And little babies make a little shelter. And the shelters that they make vary based on the species. So for my master's degree and part of my dissertation, my Ph.D., I looked at the case building behavior of these moths. And I was able to demonstrate that there is a particular behavioral pathway. And I could use this in a study to construct an evolutionary tree. And so these microleps, they have reflex behaviors. They're not learned behaviors, right? It's like hitting your knee and your knee jerking out. And so you can code those to make evolutionary trees. So this is just an example of a character that I built that would study how the shelters were made. Right, and I was, it's a niche project. There's not a lot of people out there studying these moths. My collaborator for this project is in Canada. We don't hang out together, but it was really fun. It was really nice, and I really enjoyed it. And I continued my dissertation work, and it was focusing on these moths. And then I graduated, and I had a grant with my advisor at the time, and it was time to find a job. And as I said, I was married, so I needed to find a place where both my husband and I could be employed. And that place was Sam Houston State University. And so I was in Ohio, Columbus, Ohio at the time. My husband called me up and said, they're gonna call you and they're gonna interview you over the phone, and then they can hire you as a quote unquote trailing spouse, which might be the worst insult I have ever received, ever. I was like, a what now? So I interviewed, he interviewed, I interviewed, he interviewed. This was the only university that was going to hire us both. And again, he was tenure track, and I was going to be in a closet. Seriously. The faculty there in the biology department were fantastic, but the chair of the department did not want me. So I'm there, and I'm, unhappy and interviewing and just really focusing on my moths and trying to find happiness and peace in this new place that didn't want anything to do with me. And then I get a phone call. And the phone call was from the forensic anthropologist. And she said to me, "Are you coming to the death scene?" And I said, "No." And then I hung up the phone. I didn't know who this person was. She didn't say my name. I didn't say her name. It just showed up on the little phone thingy, like this woman's name, right? And I was like, I don't know what that was about. So I, went to a faculty meeting or something lame, and then I came home, and then I went back to work the next day, and on my desk was a box. And in this box was hair and maggots and teeth and bits of clothing, pieces of dehydrated skin. And I was a little irritated, but mostly I was absolutely fascinated. And so I just started to pick through this bucket. And I found tons and tons of obviously maggots, right? And this looks weird, but all it is a bunch of maggots that had pupated together, and they created this like frothy stuff. But anyway, I picked and picked and picked and picked. And what I found in there was a caterpillar. A caterpillar that had a very specific way of building a shelter for its image, for the caterpillar stage. And this is not in the family that or even the superfamily that I studied. This is not Gallicoidea, it's Tinioidea, so not closely related other than they're both moths. But I knew what this was because I was a lepidopterist, and I knew exactly what this animal was doing because I studied this for my master's degree. So what you're looking at here is the silk shelter of this little cutie. Look at her little hairdo. Look at that. So we know, we identify families on features like her little puffy head, right? So this is Tinea pallionella, or the case-making clothes moth. And so if you have wool sweaters or anything like that at home, this caterpillar would naturally consume the hair or the fibers because that's what they were doing in the wild, right? They were eating decomposing animals before humans invented wool sweaters. So back to this little shelter. The caterpillar is tiny when it starts to build, and then as it grows, it increases the size of its case by adding on silk. But this animal also incorporates its surroundings into its silk shelter, much like my master's group. So if you look at this case, you can see sort of concentric rings like a tree. So we have the first instar or stage caterpillar, and that shelter it would have been built would be really tiny. And then the next would add on, it would open its shelter, add on more silk, and incorporate everything around as it did that. And then the third stage, and so on. But what else do you see in here? Let me take these rings. Do you see the hair? Right? So every time it got bigger, it was incorporating pieces of human hair into its silk case, as well as little pieces of the pupal cases of the flies. So I was just fascinated because this was the first account of this species of moth being found on a human cadaver. But then it got serious, right? I was just playing games over there, picking at moths, and they were alive. There's a living caterpillar in here when this was brought to me, right? This wasn't like dead, they were living. But then it got serious because it turns out that this particular case, the person who had died somewhere up in the attic. He was throwing this giant party, and after he died, the story turns out he overdosed, but after he did so, the party just went on for months and months after. And he was a squatter in this house. He wasn't supposed to be there, But it was his family home. His brother had owned it, and he wasn't on the will. But we didn't know any of that at the time. We didn't even know who he was because he was so decomposed. But because the caterpillar crawls up to the corners of the room to pupate, it takes with it its hair in the silk shelter. And the forensics department was trying to identify this human based on mitochondrial DNA from hair that was still in the clothes of the deceased. And it wasn't working because the hair, the mitochondrial DNA in that hair had degraded. But because these caterpillars were moving around and sort of, they had the hair exposed, the air sort of dried it out or petrified it, we were able to sequence the variable region of the human mitochondrial genome that would be used to entered into the mitochondrial population database. And so then we were able to identify him, and we were able to point out who his living relatives were, and at that point, his brother could no longer deny that that was his relative. So then, that was exciting, right? And I'm still out there playing with my moths, but the person I was working with decided that she was going to establish a forensic anthropology facility, which was super exciting. So she built this from the ground up, and I was part of it because we had made a friendship, and my entire research program shifted. I went from being a person who studied beautiful moths and butterflies to a person who was poking around in dead people. So we're about 70 miles north of Houston in the Piney Woods ecoregion, which is important because the other body farms that are around are not in this ecoregion. Even the other body farm in Texas is not in this ecoregion. So we have a very specific and unique ecology. And that is what I started to concentrate on. I started to concentrate on the unique ecology that is provided by the Piney Woods ecoregion. So what you're looking at here is a human leg with maggots and a male red-spotted purple. And he is drinking the fluids that are oozing off of this cadaver, and of course the maggots are consuming the cadaver. So this changed my entire world. I was now going to basically do another dissertation. I did not know a lot about the ecology of human decomposition, but if I wanted to do this and do it right, I had to learn that. So I still work on the moths, but I have rebuilt my program, my research program, my experience from the ground up, and I've had to demonstrate to colleagues over and over and over again who actually did write dissertations in forensic entomology that I am as good as they are. Oops, it's so fast. So, and this is probably no surprise to anybody, but maybe it is. Insects are the most abundant invertebrate at a decomposing human cadaver or even non-human cadaver. And for forensics, this is one of the most abundant pieces of trace evidence that a forensic investigator can have. But they have a way of telling their own story, and to be able to help the crime scene investigators, you have to be able to understand the little story that these insects are telling. So this is the inside of a cadaver's mouth, and these are fly eggs, and these are maggots, and there's a bunch of different aged maggots in this person. This is their armpit. And then the most common fly that we get is a blowfly in the family Calliphoridae. So the old models say that if you understand the stages of decomposition, you can work backwards through time. If you understand insect behavior, you can work backwards through time to estimate a maximum and a minimum postmortem interval. And this model treats these stages of decomposition like they are set in stone. And the model treats your understanding of insect evidence as though it's not variable. But a human cadaver is not absent of its ecosystem. So we think of in my lab with my collaborator, we think of decomposition as the point where insects vertebrate scavengers, and microbes come together to break apart organic compounds and return them back to the soil. But this is not taking place absent of abiotic factors. And a lot of times these abiotic factors are ignored because they're really complicated and they're hard to study. So we think of decomposition as an ecosystem, and we recognize that for any applied science, the application of the data is only good as the background research or the basic research that supports it. So the first thing that we did was quantify biodiversity, and that was super fun, and it took a year and lots of looking at dead people. And I just want to point out what's going on here. This is the female, this is a male, this is another male, and then this little latrine fly is just hanging out looking. So we compiled a huge and complete data set of insect biodiversity. It included beetles, flies, and some incidentals that I love talking about. Our library is the pinned insects and preserved insects themselves, but also the over 11,000 photographs we have of human decomposition in Southeast Texas. And I want to talk about some of the couple weird things we found. So again, with the caterpillars and the dead people, we were able to document that this oak-feeding caterpillar came down out of the trees, and after some little vertebrate scavenger pulled off the toenails, this little oak-feeding caterpillar started to eat the skin flakes. And I told this to every lepidopterist colleague I had, and they told me no, that this is not what I was seeing. And I was like, it is indeed what I'm seeing. And we had non-human carrion placed out at the same time so that we could sort of compare, and they were doing the same thing there too. So there was just something, I was gonna say something in the trees that year, or rather something missing from the trees that year, that these caterpillars had to come down and consume human flesh. He did some other awesome, bizarre things that I don't have time to talk about. Okay, fire ants. Do you guys have fire ants up here? Is it too cold? You do? Okay, yeah, I hate them. So it turns out fire ants are a huge problem. And our very first cadaver we ever got at the Southwestern Research Station was this cadaver. And we didn't ever think we were going to get another cadaver. And so what we did was we did weird things. We cut a little hole in his stomach and we buried him. And then we waited. And what my graduate student noticed is this little hole through time started to fill up with dirt. Oh, well, how? How did it fill up with dirt? But then she looked closer and it was fire ants. And then she looked even closer and she realized the fire ants were bringing pieces of dirt from next door, just, off the body, putting them in this hole, letting them fill up with ooze, and then carrying them back to the nest. They made sponges. And they did this for 9 days, and then it warmed up, and then the body, Mount Vesuvius. It just, and everything went everywhere, and the fire ants no longer had control. But for these 9 days, these ants excluded all the flies and all the maggots, and if we were going to use maggot age to estimate postmortem interval, no, we weren't. Right? It would have been off by 9 days. Oops. And then we documented all kinds of vertebrate scavengers. Are you surprised? There are vultures. There were turkey vultures and black vultures. So this is rare for unrelated species to sort of interact like this together, but they don't fight. They just eat. Crows. So vultures have little curved mouth parts, and it turns out they cannot tear the tissue. They eat the eyes and the genitalia, and then they just wait for the crows to show up. And the crows have sharp, pointy beaks, and they poke right in, and they pull the tissues out, and then the vultures can actually eat. Hawks came to our cadavers. Some of the things we weren't surprised about, possums and raccoons have their little, convergent human hands. They're always tearing apart the cadaver and eating. Some things that we didn't expect, a rabbit. This is a juvenile coyote. I guess we kind of expected the coyote, but rabbits will chew on long bones to get calcium. And in a picture I don't have because I gave it to a different researcher for a different project, people's house cats come and chew on human cadavers. And bobcats come and chew on human cadavers. But this is my all-time favorite picture ever. And so these are trail cam photos, and so movement sets the photo off. Can you see what we're looking at here? Yeah, frogs, little toads. So every time the picture went, they were just at like a hop closer and closer and closer until in the final image, there's one right there, they're all up on the cadaver, and they're eating maggots and flies, which makes sense. But this contraption you see around it is a project with chemists that we were studying volatile organic compounds. So lots and lots of vertebrate scavengers come, and we were able to document that. And then we were able to do some actual research, quantifying bloat. Everybody bloats, but everybody bloats differently. And it's really hard to measure the degree of bloat because it depends on a person's microbiome, their fat, the abiotic environment. We met up with the LIDAR guy, and he measured the decomposing bodies as though they were topological maps. He converted the shape, so he was able to show how much a person bloated or changed height, right, topology from day 1 to day 7, converted the images into shapes, calculated the volume of the shape, and then we could automatically measure bloat if we compared it from day 1 to day 7 or whatever change we wanted. And then my most recent study or work that we're doing is looking at microbes. How can we use bacteria to estimate the postmortem interval? And it turns out that your microbiome changes as you decompose. So this line here points to bloat, which marks the shift between wet decomposition and dry decomposition. And these bars that you're looking at are all like sort of an individual pie chart showing you the total percentage of the species of bacteria present at that sample. And so you can see before bloat, we have mostly the blue species, and after bloat, we have mostly the purple species. And every research project we've done after this has demonstrated this as well. So we're focusing on the idea that now we're working on this, but these flies, these blowflies, are bringing the bacteria that are in purple, and these are the bacteria that are decomposing humans. So without these flies, you get mummies, you get mummification. So this just sort of further proves or supports our idea that a human is an ecosystem, or decomposition is an ecosystem, and you have to understand all the little pieces to understand the decomposition. And then COVID, and we were all not allowed to go outside or do anything. So we wrote a book. We wrote a book about women who wore animal parts in the Victorian. And I focused on this dress that's made of beetle wings. And my colleague studied the pins that women wore that were made out of hummingbird heads. And a different colleague studied how they used to make kiwis into muffs for Victorian ladies. We had a lot, we have 9 other chapters, or 6 other chapters. So, this is my favorite. I don't know if you can read her necklace. So the book talks about how women were integral they were sort of odd showpieces, right? So in the Victorian, they were extensions of their family. They represented their husbands, their fathers. And the Victorian people were obsessed with natural history, and so these women were sort of walking museums. But they were also really, really important in the start of the animal rights movement, because at one point they realized, like, why am I doing this? Why do I have a dead cat on my head? Yeah. Okay, so take all the opportunities. Even if it means writing a book that you don't think you know anything about, it's really important to be able to be open-minded and just, I don't know, just throw yourself into what you love. You don't have to do something just to make money. You can do something just because you love it. So I always acknowledge the families of the donors of the cadavers that we do research on, because without them, our research would not be possible. I have so many collaborators, but most of the people in these pictures are my undergraduate researchers and my graduate students. They do everything with me. Funding, I was mad when I got called a trailing spouse. I was like, I'll show you trailing spouse. And then I just want to point out, does anybody follow Fat Bear? No? Okay. Our national park system, this is Katmai National Preserve up in Alaska, and this is one little point on the river, on the Katmai River, and every spring, into fall, they watch how fat the bears get. And it's brought tons of money and information to the park, and anyway, I know this seems like, why is she talking about fat bears? I always find a reason to talk about fat bears. So this is Grazer 128, and this is 32 Chunk. And 32 Chunk is a problem, you guys. Look at his nose. He is not a nice bear, but he's so chunky. So the point of Fat Bear is just to vote. You get to vote. You get to create an account, and you get to vote who you think is the fattest bear. We're not comparing 800-pound Grazer to 1,200-pound Chunk. We're comparing 800-pound Grazer in October to what she looked like when she comes out of hibernation in May, and 1,200-pound Chunk to what he looks like when he comes out of hibernation in May. Who do you think got this problem of a bear on a scale to say that he weighs 1,200 pounds? Nobody in their right mind is following this bear. She won this year because he killed one of her cubs. People were mad at Chunk. He was just being a bear. They use that LIDAR, where they measure them with LIDAR at the beginning of the season, convert their little body parts to geometric shapes, calculate the volume, compare the volume in October to the volume in May. Okay, I'm done. I would love to answer any questions. If I have time, I lost track of time.
So just one question. I mean, Sam Houston State University is how, about how long did it take you to get here?
2 hours and 6 minutes. And it was not down 45. They had me go on 19, Siri had me go on 19, which was a lovely drive.
If students, so you're currently in the biology department?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Is there also a forensic anthropology department?
No, so we have a College of Criminal Justice that has no departments. And in the College of Criminal Justice is the program of forensic science. Forensic science is only a master's program.
Okay.
They have an undergraduate online minor. But in biology, we have a forensic biology track where you take a series of classes. We just developed this. You take a series of classes that would shape you into understanding the biology behind decomposition, because as I keep saying, it was an ecosystem. So you would take entomology, medical entomology, I teach both of those, evolution, microbiology, anthropology, some online forensics classes. And we're turning that into a major so that your transcript would say degree in biology with a focus of forensic science, but in a year we hope it will say forensic biology major.
And that would be a bachelor's?
Bachelor's of Science.
Yeah.
Not online.
And then and then you have a graduate program as well. Do you do master's?
We have a graduate program and master's degree in biology. We do not offer PhDs in biology. And I have a number of graduate students who are working on, we're about to put out carrion models, rabbits, and we're gonna control the insects that are part of the ecology, and then determine what microbes they're bringing.
And you mentioned undergrad researchers, so if people were to do a degree in biology here, get their core courses done, take the prerequisite biology courses and come to you, they could potentially, as an undergrad, work in your lab?
Yes, yes. The bodies themselves cost us about $3,000 to rent because it's illegal to sell humans. It's illegal. So I pay their dead rent, is what I say. So I don't have any cadavers right now, but we have a bunch of grants in the works.
And just so people know, a lot of the pictures we saw, those are not murder scenes. Those were
No,
donated cadavers placed in the environment to
So
study.
we actually have, it's a good point. I always forget to say that. I didn't kill anybody.
Right.
It's a donation form, and you can go to our website right now and you can donate your body to science. And it's an anatomical gift, and people do that. So yeah, those are all humans who wanted to be part of our research.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah. So when I was a graduate student, I actually worked with we have at Ohio State we have this giant insectary, and I actually worked there for a couple semesters growing maggots. So I knew what maggots smelled like already, but I don't have. My husband says I'm broken. I don't have the ooh yuck. I never did. I once mailed him a baby bird that had been hit by a car and flattened and baked in the sun, and he still married me. I'm just broken. So, like, if you think you can handle it, do it. Because a lot of people think they can and they can't.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. We have about a 5-minute break. I know after that you might not want to eat anymore, but there's still plenty of cookies out there, coffee, tea, water, and then we'll have our next talk in about 4 or 5 minutes, and our last talk of the day. So I want to thank everyone that's been with us the entire time, and anyone that's just joining us. Again, this is our first celebration of the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. It's actually celebrating its 10th anniversary this year, but this is our first celebration of it, and hopefully the first of many. A lot of great speakers today. We'll wrap up with another Sam Houston State University speaker who is a clinical anatomist. And so, if you didn't have enough dead bodies to look at, I don't think any of these will be bloated, because she functions more, focuses more on things that are alive and functioning. Just be prepared for potentially some more graphic images. But if you survive the last one, I think you'll do just fine on this one. So as soon as she's ready, Dr. Quinones will give us our last talk for the day. And also thank you to all the speakers that have come as well.
Good morning. I'm Jailenne Quinones. I'm an assistant professor of clinical anatomy and anatomical sciences at the clinical anatomy department in the College of Osteopathic Medicine at Sam Houston State University. I'm a clinical anatomist and medical educator, and in my free time, I'm also a research consultant, so I help clinicians to understand the scientific methodology behind the practice. Okay, so this is the outline of what we are going to be covered during my presentation. First, we are going to talk about my professional journey. Then, we are going to discuss why anatomy matters, the evolution of anatomical sciences. So we are going to discuss some history behind anatomy. Then we are going to talk about the transformation of learning with innovation in anatomy. And finally, the take-home message of my presentation. So I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is an island which is located on the Caribbean. It has beautiful beaches, so I can go to the beach on January, February, December. We don't have winter like this, and it's beautiful. So I was born and raised in this small town which is located in the south region of Puerto Rico, which is called Guayanilla. Then I moved to Ponce to complete my bachelor in biomedical sciences. It's a bachelor in science in biomedical sciences. And on here, I was starting to get more interested in anatomy. So after completing my bachelor, I moved to Bayamón, Puerto Rico, which is near the capital city, which is San Juan in the north region. And I completed my master's in anatomical sciences and my Ph.D. in cellular and molecular biology. After completing my degrees, I moved to United States, and I have been since 2022 at Sam Houston State University, teaching medical students and residents in surgery. What happened from this to this? What you're seeing here, it's like a straight line. All of the milestones I accomplished during my professional career. But it's nothing related to this. It's nothing like this. It has ups and downs, and some of those ups and downs are out of our hands. And what I'm going to show you, it's an example of those two scenarios that I passed through my graduate trajectory. In 2017, Puerto Rico received the most catastrophic hurricane in modern history. And that hurricane was the Hurricane Maria. It was Category 5, and it passed to Puerto Rico. It left us without energy, without electricity for 7 months. We lost everything in our labs. So I started my PhD in 2015. And I lost everything. I lost donors because I was being trained in clinical anatomy. I lost donors. I lost all of my equipment. I lost everything. We lost our houses. And then 3 years after, we are here. We received 2 earthquakes, 2 major earthquakes, and again, we lost everything. After the pass of Hurricane Maria, we have 2 options: to quit or to continue moving forward and try to recover again. I choose the second option. As a part of this second option, just a year after Hurricane Maria, we lost our donors, and we established in Puerto Rico the first anatomy outreach program, which was called Mastering Anatomical Techniques. I trained on Puerto Rico over 35 physicians. Most of them are surgeons working in the United States. I trained them based on scientific foundations. I trained them on cadaveric dissections. These donors are going to be different than the other scientist was talking about, because our donors are embalmed, and these donors are being dissected by medical students. I train them, giving them workshops related to surgery. I promote collaboration between other physicians. Most of them are gynecologists, general surgeons, and orthopedic surgeons. And we also attend to different conferences. Most of those conferences are focused on anatomical sciences and medicine. Here we were presenting the anatomical variations we found in our donors, and this conference was presented by the American Association for Anatomy, and then we present at experimental biology with the American Association of Clinical Anatomy. 1 year after the Hurricane Maria, we established this. And then from 2019 to 2022, since I lost everything, after the hurricane, I joined with my mentor. This is a neuroscientist, and he's Thomas Sikorsky, and he's interested in studying the hippocampus and the synapses on the hippocampus to understand memory, how memory functions. So as a result of this collaboration and my thesis work, I obtained a fellowship from the NIH. I've also collaborated with Janelia Research Campus. I've also joined to Harvard Medical School with the Biomedical Sciences Careers Program, which I highly encourage you if you're pursuing careers in healthcare. The Biomedical Sciences Careers Program have different programs for undergraduates, for high schools, for graduate students who are interested in pursuing MD, PhDs, PhD, or just DO programs. So if you're interested in STEM's career, the Biomedical Science Careers Program for Harvard School of Medicine, it's a great opportunity. Another opportunity is from Yale School of Medicine, and it's the Yale Ciencia Academy. This Yale Ciencia Academy provides mentorship for 1 year for students who are also interested in STEM's careers. Most of my fellows are focused on public health, psychology, math, science, and medicine. Here I am with another group of students. This is currently a surgeon, gynecologist, surgeon. She's a neurosurgeon, and this one is a neurologist. All of them are in the United States, and I help them on their training on medicine. At the end of my PhD, I finished with 4 publications. Most of my publications are focused on the anatomical variations. So I'm looking to what makes us different internally. I'm specifically interested in vascular anatomical variations and nervous anatomical variations. And here I am collaborating with an institution in Canada where we are looking for variations in the common carotid artery. In 2022, just after my graduation, I got selected to the Anatomy Scholars Program, which is a program from the American Association for Anatomy. And on here, we promote the value of service, teaching, and research in academia. Last year, I got selected from the Sam Houston State University College of Osteopathic Medicine, and I received the Award of Excellence in Research. And since the last 3 years in the COM, I have been able to train more than 25 medical students, published 18 publications, 3 grants awarded, 1 intramural, 2 extramurals, and received this Excellence in Research grant. So what's the take-home message of showing you all of these accomplishments after these events. What's the take-home message here? The take-home message is to become resilient, perseverant, and most important, surround with the correct people. Mentorship matters. Here I'm presenting you all of my mentors, and each person here have contributed to my professional development at certain point of my career. So why anatomy matters? Anatomy is a foundation of science. Why I become interested in anatomy? When I was 12 years old, my hobby was to dissect dead animals in my backyard, in the backyard of my house. With 12 years, I was insane. But yeah, I was dissecting the lizards, and I was mainly interested in the kidneys. And when I finished my dissections in the backyard, I went to my computer, and I saw this photo. And this photo, I saw this photo when I was 12 years old, and until today, I have this photo laminated in my office. And I didn't understand at that point why the kidneys were fused inferiorly. And not was until I entered to the college that I understand this was an anatomical variation, and this is called horseshoe kidney. Most of the anatomical variations, they have no symptoms. They are asymptomatic, and the patients will never know they have those anatomical variations, but most of them are going to cause symptoms and diseases, and those are the ones I'm interested. And that's why I collaborate with physicians to find the clinical significance of those anatomical variations we discover in the lab. But why anatomy matters? What is anatomy? Anatomy comes from the Greek verb, which is anatomai, and it means to cut and to open. That's why dissection is the foundation of anatomy. So anatomy is the foundation of medical practice, and not only medical practice, but for healthcare, for nursing, for EMS, for everything. Anatomy is a foundation. It's going to provide you an accurate diagnosis and effective treatments. Also, anatomy is going to bridge the gap between theory and practice. Why? Because if you have a good understanding of the anatomical foundations, you will understand why you have to administer a medication in the gluteal region of the patient in the upper right or left corner. Why? Because the sciatic nerve is coming off from the lumbosacral plexus in the lower portions of the gluteal region. And that's the reason. Emerging medical innovations, it's also another point why anatomy matters, and it's because if you have a solid understanding of anatomy, you are going to rely on new technologies. You are going to understand the integration of medical imaging, like CT, MRI, and ultrasound. And most importantly, anatomy matters because it can provide an individualized patient care. Because you can recognize, based on your foundation in anatomy, you can recognize anatomical variations. And just to let you know, anatomical variations counts to 20% of the operating room complications and misdiagnosis, which is a high percentage. And anatomy matters also because we can promote the research, we can promote scientific foundation from the anatomy perspective. Here I am with all of my students. All of them are physicians, my current medical students in Sam Houston State University. I'll also be in training from the scientific foundations, and here are some of my students and colleagues which have been contributed to these recent papers. I'm collaborating with plastic surgeons, orthopedic surgeons. Here I have one of my mentees, which is a gynecologist. This one is a pathologist, urogynecologist, gynecologist, and the last one, which is this one, it's an orthopedic surgeon. This is one of the few orthopedic surgeons, pediatric orthopedic surgeons focused on scoliosis in the United States. Okay, let's talk about now the evolution of anatomical sciences and why anatomy matters and what happened with these emerging technologies. Anatomical sciences has evolved since the 3rd century. When we observed photos from the 3rd century, we found Galen. And Galen was one of the fathers of anatomy. And Galen performed the first human body dissections. At this point, the anatomy was something which was like inspiring. Then from the 3rd century, we passed through the 12th century. In the 12th century, we observed dissections from Da Vinci and drawings from Michelangelo. What happened here? Because of Leonardo da Vinci and all of these famous and highly detailed dissections and anatomical sketches, because of him, the anatomy evolved from being something inspiring to being rejected by the religion. After that, from the 16th century and onward, we have the father of the modern science of anatomy, which is Andrea Vesalius. And Andrea Vesalius also published this book, this famous book, which is the Humanity Corporis. And this famous book corrects more than 200 errors Galen made on the beginning. He also promoted the anatomy to be something which is for the open public. So in this case, he promoted the dissections on this space, which are the anatomical theaters. And on the anatomical theaters, the public could assist and attend those dissections with physicians. Then at the end, and we are here on the 18th century, we have Fragonard. And Fragonard, instead of performing the dissection, he performed the dissection, but at the end, he preserved the bodies. And he preserved the bodies using wax, color wax, and this wax was inserted into the vasculature. When I usually give this presentation, a lot of people ask me if this is the same procedure bodies exhibition use, and it's not the same. Bodies use plastination, and plastination is completely different than the color wax. On plastination, we use the bones, and we have to remove all of the soft tissue. And on the soft tissue, we create the plastinates. So it's completely different. So as we observe here, the anatomy evolution through the different centuries, and it's the oldest science in medicine. And that's why I've always promoted that anatomy is going to be your foundation in your healthcare profession. Now, these are two figures which represents an anatomical dissection. And here we are observing the back of a person. This is a trapezium. And on here, I'm showing you the pelvic cavity. As you observe here, this is going to be the foundation of anatomy. But we are not on this place right now. We are using this as a base on medicine, and we are training medical professionals using dissection. However, we are moving into something which is innovative. So we have two options here, to consider this and into this, or instead of using this, we are just adapting to the new reality. So this is the augmented reality. In medical school, we are using augmented reality with the headsets to promote and recall and reinforce the anatomy. And at the same time, this is something which is innovative. And this is called robotic surgery or remote robotic surgery. Remote robotic surgery was proposed last year, and it's basically a physician which is, for example, in China, can perform a surgery with a patient in United States. And this is called remote robotic surgery. And this is something which we are talking about in medicine and surgery on these times. And it's going to be implemented very soon. So the transformation of learning with innovation, right now we are teaching in medical school using the cadaver dissection, but at the same time we are promoting emerging technologies. Most of those emerging technologies are 3D printing and VR. On 3D printing, we are promoting, for example, the development, anatomy, and we are promoting the spatial understanding. There is a discipline in anatomy which is very difficult and challenging to understand, and it's embryology. Embryology is the development of the human body. So embryology, it's very difficult, mainly from fertilization to implantation and then organogenesis, which is basically the development of the organs. And we are using 3D printing and VR. Here are my students presenting with the headset and presenting these specific stages on pregnancy, on early pregnancy, on different conferences. And we are using, instead of teaching the students with the book, we are using 3D printing and we are using VR. Augmented reality, it's mostly used in residency, mostly by surgeons and gynecologists. Before any practice or any clinical scenario, they use this to reinforce the anatomy as well. Here I have another medical student who is presenting an anatomical variation we study on the pelvic vasculature. And here it's my student presenting the 3D printing from early pregnancy and the development of the different stages. So what's the take-home message of this presentation? First, never stop dreaming. Progress in education, it's in research, and it starts with a vision, it starts with curiosity. Second, the future, it's collaborative. Actually, the science, it's collaboration. If you do science, you need to collaborate. Learning evolves with technology. Those emerging tools are going to continue revolution, not only in medicine, but also in science. And the anatomical sciences are foundational. Anatomical sciences are foundational not only for medicine, but for all healthcare professions. Thank you. If you want advice to get to apply to medical school, if you're interested in doing MD, PhD, focus on anatomy or physiology, or if you want just to apply to medical school, just let me know. This is my QR code. You're going to have access to LinkedIn, my professional webpage, or my email, and I can advise you. I'm also part of the admissions committee in different medical school, and it will be an honor to help you to achieve your goals. Thank you.
So, Sam Houston State University, Dr. Bucheli is from the biology department. You're from the School of Osteopathic Medicine. And I was going to ask you about this. I mean, undergrads at a community college, they're going to need to go on to a four-year school. Most people that apply to these programs are going to have killer GPAs.
Correct.
What do they need besides good grades to be a successful candidate to get into these medical programs? Is there any recipe for what's the best credentials?
The secret, it's doing research, good shadowing, and most importantly, a score in the MCAT, a good score in the MCAT. And we are talking about above 509. So that's the secret to enter to medical school. The MCAT, it's the most important thing.
And I think there's various MCAT preparation resources.
Yes, the AAMC, they have resources to QBanks and different other resources where you can have access. And they also have different exams where you can take just to prove your knowledge before starting studying.
Does anyone else have any questions for Dr. Quinones? Well, I thank all the speakers that are still here for joining us. I think this was a very successful first run at celebrating women in the sciences. And I'll just give you all, everyone that's still here, give you all a big round of applause and thank you all for coming.